What if the safest place on Earth was also the deadliest? Imagine this. The world outside is ending. Sirens blare, chaos reigns, and you manage to find refuge in a deep underground bunker with a handful of strangers. You slam the heavy steel door shut, cutting off the apocalypse. You've made it. You're safe. Or so you think. Days turn into weeks. The initial relief of survival starts to fade, replaced by a new, creeping dread. The bunker, once a sanctuary, now feels like a tomb. It starts with a flicker of the lights, a strange scratching sound from the ventilation shafts that run through every room like a metal spiderweb. At first, you dismiss it. It's an old bunker. It's bound to make noises. But then, someone accidentally drops a metal can. The clatter echoes through the silent halls, and before anyone can react, a horrifying shriek erupts from the vent above. Something impossibly fast, a blur of shadow and claws bursts out, dragging the person into the darkness of the duct. Then silence. A deafening, terrifying silence. The rule becomes brutally clear. Make a sound, and you die. A cough, a sneeze, a single misstep on a creaky floorboard could be your last. The group is now trapped in a prison of their own making, where the very act of breathing feels like a gamble. Communication is reduced to desperate hand signals and fearful glances. Paranoia becomes the new air you breathe. Who will be the next to make a mistake? The tension is unbearable. You see the terror in everyone's eyes. The person next to you has a coughing fit coming on, and they're trying to suppress it, their face turning red, their bodies shaking. What do? Help them and risk making noise yourself, or back away to save your own skin. The true horror isn't the monster in the vents. It's the monster it creates within each of you. Alliances crumble. The quietest person becomes the most trustworthy, while the clumsy or the sick become liabilities, threats to the entire group. Someone starts whispering about a way out, a maintenance hatch on the other side of the bunker. But to get there, you have to cross a long, open corridor with a massive ventilation duct running the length of the ceiling. It's a suicide mission. Every footstep is a roll of the dice. The psychological toll is immense. You start to hear things in the silence phantom whispers, the scraping of claws even when it's quiet. Is it real, or is your mind breaking? The bunker, your supposed salvation, is now a carefully constructed death trap, where the only way to live is to pretend you don't exist. You can't scream. You can't cry. You can't even whisper for help. The true end of the world wasn't what was happening outside. It's happening right here, in the suffocating silence of the bunker. The ultimate question becomes, what's worse, the monster hunting you in the dark, or the lengths you'll go to survive when your own humanity is the price of silence? What do you think you would do in this situation? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this dive into the dark, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying scenarios. Imagine living in a place where the sun never shines. Not for a day, not for a week, but forever. This is the horrifying reality for the residents of Port Blossom, a once sunny coastal town now suffocated by an unnatural, permanent darkness. It all started with a strange black cloud that rolled in from the sea. At first, people thought it was just an unusual storm front, but the storm never came, and the cloud never left. It just hangs there, a dense, inky ceiling over the town, plunging everything into an eternal, damp twilight. The sun is gone, and with it, the warmth and the familiar rhythms of life. A constant, oppressive humidity has settled over Port Blossom, clinging to everything like a cold sweat. It seeps into the wood of the houses, making them swell and rot. It coats the windows with a perpetual film of condensation, blurring the already dim world outside. But the dampness brought something far more sinister than just decay. It brought the mold. It started small, faint patches of a strange glowing fungus appearing in the darkest, wettest corners of the town. But this was no ordinary mold. It's bioluminescent, casting an eerie, pulsating blue-green light in the perpetual gloom. People were initially fascinated by the otherworldly glow, a strange sort of beauty in their new dark world. They called it glimmer spore, but the fascination quickly turned to terror. The glimmer spore grows at an alarming rate, spreading from damp corners onto streets, buildings, and eventually onto living things. The first victims were the town's pets. Dogs and cats, once familiar companions, started acting erratically. Their eyes would glow with the same haunting light as the mold that began to trace patterns across their fur. They became aggressive, almost feral, as if controlled by some unseen force. Then, the horror touched the human population. People who spent too much time in the damp, mold-infested areas started to change. It began with a cough, a simple inhalation of the glowing spores. Then came the strange, luminescent rashes on their skin. Those infected, the glow-touched, as they're now called, are no longer themselves. They wander the darkened streets in a trance-like state, their bodies illuminated from within by the parasitic mold. They don't speak, they just a low resonant frequency that seems to communicate with the mold itself, encouraging its growth. They are the gardeners of this new, terrifying ecosystem. They actively spread the spores, touching doors, windows, and even other people, their glowing hands leading behind a deathly beautiful, contagious light. The healthy residents of Port Blossom are trapped. The cloud is impenetrable, cutting them off from the outside world. All communication is dead. They live in a state of constant fear, barricaded in their homes, fighting a losing battle against the encroaching damp and the glowing tendrils of the glimmer spore. Outside, the glow-touched shamble through the streets, their eerie light painting a beautiful, horrifying scene. They are the new inhabitants of Port Blossom, living puppets for the luminous entity that has consumed their town. The black cloud above isn't just blocking the sun. It's a cage. And inside, a new form of life is blossoming in the dark, one that sees humanity as nothing more than fertile soil. How long can anyone survive when the very air you breathe and the walls around you are turning against you? In Port Blossom, the light doesn't save you. It consumes you. It all started with an auction. As an art historian, I've handled my fair share of oddities, but nothing like this. It was a small, palm-sized sculpture, carved from a metal I couldn't identify. It felt cold, impossibly dense, and its surface seemed to shift with geometric patterns that my eyes couldn't quite follow. The auction house had no provenance, no history. They just called it the Labyrinthine Orb. Against my better judgment, I bought it. That first night, I placed it on my desk. As I worked, I'd glance at it. Each time I did, a wave of vertigo would wash over me. The lines of my bookshelf would seem to bend. The corners of the room would feel just a little too sharp, or a little too soft. I'd blink, and everything would snap back to normal. I chalked it up to fatigue, a long day. But the feeling lingered, a subtle hum of wrongness at the edge of my perception. The next morning, I went to my usual coffee shop. The barista, a young woman named Chloe, who's made my latte every day for 2 years, greeted me with a smile. But it wasn't her smile. It was a fraction too wide. Her eyes didn't crinkle at the corners the way they always did. She handed me my coffee and said, "Here's your usual, Dr. Alistair." I've never told her my last name. When I asked her how she knew it, she just laughed, a sound that was a half note higher than her real laugh, and turned to the next customer. Walking home, the familiar streets felt alien. The cracks in the pavement seemed to form new, unsettling patterns. The old oak tree on the corner had one less branch than I remembered. Or did it? I started to doubt my own memory. Was I just overtired? Stressed? That evening, my sister Clara came over for dinner. We have this running joke where we try to outdo each other with terrible puns. But tonight, she was quiet. She sat at my table, perfectly still, her posture unnaturally straight. When I told a particularly bad joke about ancient Rome, she didn't groan like she always did. She just stared at me, a blank expression on her face, and said, "That is an illogical sequence of words." Then she took a sip of her wine, holding the glass with her fingers perfectly spaced, a way I'd never seen her hold anything before. That's when I truly started to feel the ice-cold dread in my stomach. This wasn't Clara. It looked like her, sounded mostly like her, but the person inside was a stranger. I looked over at my desk, at the strange metal object sitting there. It seemed to pulse with a faint internal light, though I knew that was impossible. Over the next few days, it got worse. My colleagues at the university were replaced. My neighbor, who always complained about my loud music, greeted me with a serene smile and offered me freshly baked cookies. Everyone was just slightly off. Their conversations were stilted, their emotions muted. They were like flawless copies with a single critical error in their code. They were all polite, efficient, and utterly devoid of the messy, beautiful chaos of being human. I started locking the orb in a safe, but it didn't help. Just knowing it was in the house was enough. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw its impossible geometry, its shifting patterns. The world I knew was being systematically erased and replaced by a flawless, sterile imitation. I was the only one who noticed. I was the last remaining piece of the original puzzle. Last night, I took the orb out of the safe. I held it in my hands, its cold surface seeping into my bones. As I stared into its depths, the walls of my study began to dissolve into a kaleidoscope of shifting colors and impossible angles. I saw glimpses of other places, other times, all folding into one another. And in that chaotic whirlwind, I saw them. Beings of pure geometry, meticulously building a new reality, brick by perfect brick, replacing every imperfection. I realized then that they weren't malicious. They were just tidy. They were cosmic gardeners, weeding out the chaotic mess of my reality and replacing it with something orderly. And I was the last weed. I don't know what to do. If I destroy the orb, will my world return? Or will I simply erase myself from this new, perfect reality? I'm recording this because my memory is starting to fade. The little details, the quirks of the people I loved, they're becoming blurry. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, my reflection smiles back at me just a fraction of a second too late, and its smile is a little too wide. I'm afraid that soon I won't even notice the difference. I'm afraid of becoming one of them, perfect, polished, and empty. Thanks for listening. Have you ever caught a glimpse of your reflection and felt a disconnect? Like the person staring back isn't quite you? For Sarah, that feeling became a living nightmare. It all started when she moved into her new apartment. It was perfect, except for one thing: a massive, ornate, full-length mirror in the bedroom. It was bolted to the wall, ancient and imposing. The landlord said it was an antique, impossible to move. Sarah didn't mind. It added a certain vintage charm. At first, the first week was fine. She'd glance at her reflection while getting ready for work, seeing her own tired but happy face staring back. But then, subtle things started to change. A flicker in the reflection's eyes when her own were still. A shadow of a smile when she wasn't smiling. She dismissed it as tricks of the light, her mind playing games after long days. One night, she was getting ready for bed, brushing her teeth in the adjoining bathroom, her back mostly to the mirror. She glanced over her shoulder at her reflection, and her heart stopped. The Sarah in the mirror wasn't tired. She wasn't calm. Her eyes were wide with sheer, abject terror. Her mouth was a silent scream, her hands pressed against the glass as if trying to break through. But Sarah herself was just standing there, toothbrush in hand, frozen. She blinked, and the reflection was normal again. Just her, looking puzzled. She tried to laugh it off, telling herself she was sleep-deprived. But the image was seared into her mind. Over the next few days, the occurrences became more frequent, more terrifying. She'd be reading a book on her bed, and in the mirror, her reflection would be pacing frantically back and forth, wringing its hands. She'd be on the phone, laughing with a friend, but the woman in the glass would be weeping, tears streaming down her face, her expression one of utter despair. The reflection seemed to be living a separate life of agony, trapped behind the silvered surface. It was her, but it wasn't. It was a version of her locked in a private hell. Then, things escalated. The reflection started to interact with its world. One evening, Sarah watched in horror as her mirrored self picked up a mirrored hairbrush and hurled it at the back of the mirror, as if trying to shatter it from the inside. There was no sound, of course, just the silent, desperate rage of her doppelganger. It began scratching at the glass, its fingernails leaving no marks, its silent pleas for release becoming more frantic. Sarah became obsessed. She covered the mirror with a sheet, but she could still feel its presence, a cold spot in the room. Curiosity and fear gnawed at her, and she'd find herself pulling the sheet away, just to see what the other her was doing. Sometimes, the reflection would be curled in a ball on the floor, looking broken. Other times, it would be staring right at her, its eyes filled with a terrifying mix of pleading and hatred. One night, the worst happened. Sarah was lying in bed, unable to sleep, staring at the shrouded mirror. A faint scratching sound made her sit bolt upright. It wasn't coming from behind the mirror this time. It was coming from her side of the glass. Slowly, she reached out and pulled back the corner of the sheet. Her reflection was there, inches from the surface. But it wasn't desperate anymore. It was smiling. A slow, cold, calculating smile. Its finger was tracing a line on the inside of the glass, perfectly mirroring where her own hand had just been. It looked at her, then pointed at her, then pointed at itself, and then made a slow, deliberate motion of switching places. Sarah finally understood. The reflection wasn't just trapped. It wasn't just suffering. It wanted out, and it had a plan. It wanted to switch places. The terrified, screaming figure she'd first seen wasn't her doppelganger. It was the previous tenant. And the thing wearing her face now was trying to make her the next captive in its glass prison. She scrambled out of bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had to get out. As she fumbled for the light switch, she glanced back at the mirror one last time. In the dim light, she saw her reflection calmly step away from the glass. It walked over to the mirrored version of her bedroom door, opened it, and stepped through, disappearing into the darkness of the mirrored hallway, leaving Sarah alone in her room, with the chilling realization that the door in the mirror was now open. They say some places hold on to their memories. The Blackwood Toy Factory is one of those places. For 100 years, it stood silent, a monument to a forgotten tragedy. A fire, they called it. An accident that claimed the lives of everyone inside, sealing its doors and its secrets. But secrets have a way of getting out. A big-shot developer bought the property, dreaming of turning the old brick and soot into luxury lofts. The first crew of renovation workers went in, full of optimism and plans. They found the main workshop just as it was left. Half-carved wooden horses, eyeless teddy bears, and a thick, heavy silence. It was in the basement that things started to go wrong. Behind a bricked-up wall, they found a hidden room. It wasn't on any of the blueprints. The air inside was freezing, and it smelled of ozone and something sickly sweet, like burnt sugar. The room was filled with shelves, and on those shelves sat hundreds of porcelain dolls. Their painted faces were perfect, their glass eyes glistening in the beams of the workers' flashlights. They were all unfinished, waiting for their final touches. But the strangest part? They all seemed to be looking right at them. The next day, one of the workers, a guy named Dave, showed up with a deep, nasty gash on his arm. He swore he didn't know how he got it. Later that afternoon, another worker found one of the porcelain dolls. It had a fresh, identical crack running down its delicate porcelain arm. Coincidence, they thought. A weird, creepy coincidence. But then it happened again. A woman on the team, Maria, tripped and fell down a flight of stairs, breaking her leg in 2 places. And in the hidden room, a doll was found at the bottom of the shelves, its porcelain legs shattered. Panic started to set in. The factory, once just an old building, began to feel like a living, breathing thing. A labyrinth designed to trap them. Hallways that were straight the day before, now twisted into dead ends. Doors would lock on their own. The faint, tinkling sound of a music box would echo from empty rooms, and sometimes, in the periphery of their vision, they'd swear they saw the small, shadowy figures of children darting just out of sight. The workers started to argue, fear turning them against each other. They were no longer just renovating a building. They were fighting for their lives against an unseen force that played with them like a child with a new set of toys. They soon realized the fire wasn't an accident. It was an attempt to destroy the dolls, to end the evil that had taken root there. The factory's original owner, a man named Silas Blackwood, hadn't just been a toy maker. He had been dabbling in something much darker, trying to capture life itself within the clay and glass. He succeeded, but not in the way he intended. The dolls became vessels, not for life, but for a malevolent mimicry of it. They absorbed the pain and suffering of those around them, reflecting it back in a twisted, deadly game. Now, trapped inside, the remaining crew has to solve the factory's century-old puzzle. The dolls watch from their shelves, their painted smiles seeming to widen with each passing hour. They are no longer just unfinished toys. They are the keepers of this tomb, and they don't like to be disturbed. The factory has been reopened, and its deadly game has begun again. The only way out is to finish what the fire started, but the dolls have other plans. After all, playtime has just begun. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more Tales from the Shadows. See you next time.